Hello, and welcome to Breast Cancer Conversations, a podcast brought to you by survivingbreastcancer.org. I am Laura Carfing, breast cancer survivor and founder of survivingbreastcancer.org, a nonprofit organization providing community, education, and resources to empower those diagnosed with breast cancer and their caregivers from day one and beyond. Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of Breast Cancer Conversations. I am so glad you guys are here and tuning in. If you are new to the podcast, welcome. So glad you're here, despite probably the circumstances of breast cancer. Yeah, totally get that. But on our podcast, we talk about all things breast cancer. Nothing is off limits. If this episode or any of our episodes actually resonate with you, we would love to hear from you. There is a new feature in our show notes. You can click love this episode and send us a text message. Let us know your name and where you're calling from, and we will give you a shout out in next week's episode. We also have over 400 programs a year that you can participate in virtually, 100% free. Everything from yoga and meditation to expressive writing, art therapy, and a variety of support groups you can join, all from the comfort of your own home. I hope to see you online at an upcoming event. You can check out the information at survivingbreastcancer.org/events. All right, so let's dive into it. Today, we are speaking with Debbie Lesser. She is incredible. We had the pleasure of meeting her actually when we were down in Atlanta at the Young Survivor Coalition conference, summit, event. I don't know what we want to call it these days, but it was incredible. She shared her story about being a previvor, and we hit it off right away. Needless to say, we invited her on the podcast. Debbie shares her story of how she found out she was BRCA positive. I won't spill the beans just yet. You have to listen to the episode for how she found out. But then we dive into how knowing this information really affects everything in your family. It's not just personal, but what about your sisters? What about your children? What about your daughters, etc.? And so we really dive into the nuts and bolts of not only finding out that you have a genetic predisposition to developing breast cancer and the increase of the overall lifetime risk, but then also like the realities of, do I take action now? Am I ready for it? What else is going on in my life? Am I trying to have a kid? Am I getting married and having babies and want to plan other things? All of these questions are swirling in our minds once we find out that there is a predisposition to breast cancer. Welcome to the conversation.
I am in Atlanta, Georgia. I just had a birthday, so I'm 57.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. I'm married. We're a blended family. I have a total of 4 kids. 2 are my biological and 2 are my bonus children. They're all in their 20s. The cool thing for my kids is that they've seen, it's interesting. Nobody in my family has been exposed to cancer. They've all seen what being proactive looks like. So I'm really lucky to be able to say that, because most people that end up having a double mastectomy have had cancer impact them in some way. And so I have had some family members who have said, we don't have cancer in our family. What are you doing? You're being quite radical in your decision making. So I've had a mixed group of emotions with, and responses from family members over this journey.
And that's such an interesting perspective too, right? Because you're absolutely right. Like normally it's like, oh, my grandmother had breast cancer, or my mom or my sister or sister-in-law, all of these things. So then you start talking to your doctor about it. Like, does it run in my family? Should I be tested? Should I start screening earlier? But how did you come to find out that you carry a predisposition to breast cancer?
So I am a medical sign language interpreter, and I have been working in healthcare for many years, and I happened to take a specialized training. This was back in 2013, I think, that I took this training. We had lots of specialists come and talk with us, and one was a genetic counselor, and I was fascinated. So at the break, I went and said hello and said, had no idea that was a job, and next lifetime I want to do what you do, and how cool. And she said, if you like genetics, there are these really cool at-home DNA tests that you can take to find out your family history. And I was so confident. I just finished the whole Outlander series. I don't know if you ever read that, but
yes.
Yeah. So I knew I was part Scottish. I had to be. So, so I did 23andMe, and I sent it away for my husband. Did it? I got DNA tests done for my dogs because we had to figure out figured we could train them better if we knew what breeds they were. So, and I got my results back, and it showed, number one, I have absolutely zero Scottish.
No.
Yeah, I'm all Eastern European. In fact, my DNA shows I am 99.8% Ashkenazi Jewish descent.
Now, did you know that before the test?
Both my parents are Jewish, and my dad used to say that we are direct descendants of the Kohanes, which are like the high priests from the Second Temple. And I thought, how in the world does my dad know that? Quite an arrogant statement. And, but he might actually be right. So yeah. So because the specific genetic mutation that I have was actually researched and traced back to the Second Temple. So it's crazy that, yeah, I had no idea that this kind of research has been done on genetics. But anyhow, so I got my test results back, and it showed that I had this BRCA1 mutation. And I thought, I have no cancer in my family. My mom is one of 5 siblings. Four of them are girls. My dad is an only child, but I'd never heard of cancer on his side. So I happened to go, I was 46, and I went for a regular mammogram, and my doctor said, I completely agree with you. I think it's a false positive for, $199. It's gotta, it's not right. Can't be right. But if you want me to send you to a genetic counselor, I'd be happy to write a referral for you. And the only reason I said yes was because I work in healthcare, and I had never seen genetic mapping before. So I said, yes, I'd like to go see what that looks like. So I sat down with the genetic counselor, apologized for wasting her time. I'm here just for educational purposes. And I just want to see how you do mapping. And she said, you're Jewish. And I said, yep. I'm very Jewish, apparently. I'm culturally Jewish, but apparently, to the DNA. And she said, has anyone died of, and she named different cancers. My grandfather on my dad's side had passed away in his 70s, or maybe he was 80, from pancreatic cancer. And I didn't think much of it because, but the genetic counselor did. So she said, check Jewish, check pancreatic cancer. Let's just get that. Totally. Yes. And I don't know what I don't know. So yeah, I was really shocked. So she said, let's just get that gene test, that one mutation tested one more time by a Myriad lab, an approved, hospital-based lab. And it turns out 23andMe used that kind of lab already. I want to say it's called CLIA approved, or I think that might be right. Anyway, it turns out that the results were accurate. So I immediately started doing some research. I connected with some nonprofit organizations that provided me with education. And I was 46, already had my kids, decided, I read that if you get your ovaries removed, that it reduces your risk of breast cancer by 50%. So I thought, that's a no-brainer. I'm going to go ahead. And there's no testing really for ovarian cancer. And BRCA1 raises your risk of both breast and ovarian cancer. So I decided to go get a hysterectomy. And I was terrified of menopause. So I told my surgeon to make sure I had a hormone patch on when surgery was done. And I woke up, and the first thing I did was look down and look for my patch, and it was there. So that was it for like the next 2 years. I wasn't planning on getting a mastectomy. I thought, I've reduced my risk by 50%. I'm good to go. And I educated my kids, who were teenagers at the time, my 2 girls, about really all 4 kids, about, what I was going through and why I was doing this. And then fast forward about 2 years, I happened to see the exact same doctor that said, yeah, it's probably a false positive. I saw her again for a regular mammogram. And she said, you really do have BRCA1? And I said, yes. And she said, why? What is that patch doing on you? And I said, well, I mean, the amount of hormone, it's estrogen, but the amount of hormone is so little compared to what my normally what my body would make. I thought it's probably not a big deal, right? And she said, you're even though you're feeding the beast breadcrumbs, you're still feeding the beast. So either take the patch off or go get a mastectomy. And I was so terrified of menopause because I had heard so many horror stories about how it just completely, you get foggy and you get moody and you get hot and sweaty and you get all these horrible things. One woman was like, I blow up at people for no reason. And another woman said, I got divorced over, as soon as I hit menopause, and like all these crazy, horrible stories. So I thought, I guess I'm going to go get a mastectomy. So, yeah. So I did more research and I did, so my hysterectomy was in 2014 and my mastectomy was in 2016.
That's an amazing overview. Thank you so much for sharing literally 4 years of this timeline, so quickly with us and just so nonchalantly, which I'm sure has played in your head over and over again. And in the moment is probably not as nonchalant in the moment, right? And so I want to back up to a lot of the things that you just mentioned. So first off, when I think about 23andMe, I'm thinking this is a fun test to learn about my family history, right? Were you expecting to discover any mutations, or was this really a fun thing you were doing and you got your pets tested too? Let's take a quick break. We will be right back.
Are you ready to unlock your full potential? I want to introduce you to the Fit, Healthy, and Happy podcast, a powerful resource to transform your life today. With expert interviews, practical tips, and inspiring stories, this podcast is your roadmap to lasting wellness. Here's what a listener has to say.
I used to struggle with my health, but this podcast changed everything. It's like having a personal trainer, nutritionist, and life coach totally for free.
With over 2,000 five-star reviews, we're a podcast you can trust. The Fit, Healthy, and Happy podcast, available now wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah. Oh, totally fun. And my pets were not tested by 23andMe, totally different test, but I just got, but I got, so excited. I was like, oh, I got to research that too. I tend to do research. I just, I enjoy, finding out about things, and I just have a curious nature about me, which is why I went to see the genetic counselor clearly. So, I just was expecting a fun test. That's all. I knew I would get healthcare information. My youngest daughter happens to have Crohn's disease. So I expected maybe I have some IBS or something, I expected something like that. But no, not a cancer mutation.
Right, exactly. And so it was great that you were able to actually see the genetics counselor and then be able to, I don't want to call it necessarily a second opinion, but get this second test to validate what the data said from 23andMe. How did that information get delivered to you?
23andMe, and this was in 2013. So 23andMe, I happened to just get the results. I almost immediately after that, I would say within a year or maybe even 6 months after that, they started calling people if you had a mutation, so you wouldn't just get your results. So when my daughters were tested, both my daughters wanted to be tested as soon as they turned 18. So when they got tested, I think one of them may have gone through 23andMe and then also did it through the genetic counselor at the hospital. But through 23andMe, they got a phone call. So as soon as I saw their email that said, we'd like to schedule a call with you, I knew, oh, there's something up. The genetic counselor at the hospital, she called me and asked to schedule a time for me to come in. And
so you kind of had this feeling that okay, they're calling me in, or there's a callback, there's some sort of follow up.
I took them off guard when they called me, because it was a different person than I met with. So when she called me to say, we have this information that might be overwhelming and scary, I was just like, I have the BRCA mutation, right? And she was so I was very matter of fact with her. I think that caught her off guard. I know that testing has become much more accurate now than it was even way back then. But I would never recommend taking any action without seeing a medical professional and talking to a licensed genetic counselor for sure.
So it sounds like because of this like horror story that you've been hearing about menopause, that, thinking about like getting your ovaries removed was like first and foremost. Because I think a lot of times we hear that someone is carrying the BRCA mutation and is immediately thinking about the double mastectomy followed by the ovaries, right? And so you kind of had this opposite order, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. And it depends on your age, obviously, because if you're younger and you have a high prevalence of cancer in your family, then you may go directly to a mastectomy because you want to keep your ovaries, because you want to have children and what have you. At my age, I was 46. I already was done having children. So for me, it made more sense to get my ovaries removed first.
And was there talk at the time about, understanding the role that estrogen plays in breast cancer?
You're right. There wasn't a whole lot of conversation about that. So I have the BRCA1 mutation, which means that, and my specific mutation is 187 DELAG. So that's my particular on the protein strand. That's where my mutation occurred. A lot of people with my mutation have triple negative breast cancer, which means it doesn't even, so estrogen is not a factor. We wouldn't be given something like tamoxifen or an estrogen inhibitor to prevent cancer for us because we just don't respond to that. So and that's not something that I would know on my own. But I mean, I did some research, brought it back to my physician, had a conversation with them. Is it guaranteed that I'm triple negative? No, if I were to get cancer, but there's a high likelihood that it would be triple negative, which means treatment protocols are much more, are much different. Yeah. So you're right. I did notice that the responses from various physicians, and I did get multiple opinions before I made a move on something. Different people said different things, but that was consistent, was that yes, people with this particular type of BRCA1 mutation typically have triple negative breast cancer, and therefore this is how we would treat it.
As you're going through all of this, you seem like super laser focused and like, okay, you have information, I'm going to make decisions. You're taking the matters into your own hands. You feel like the empowered patient advocate right here, talking to your physician, right? And I think that's fantastic. I feel like I have a lot of the same similar characteristics where it's just like, I need to advocate for myself. I need to get information so I can make the best informed decision to me. I think there's also the polar opposite of people who don't want to know the information and would just rather say, let me just kind of navigate this, or whatever my doctor says is the final word. I don't need a second opinion, et cetera. So I do want to kind of acknowledge that, personalities and how people want to take information and make decisions can vary on that spectrum as well.
I like that you brought that up because I'm one of 6 girls, but we all are in sets of 2. Mom and dad have been married and divorced a couple times each. So, I have a half sister, and so out of all 6 of us, I know for sure the oldest is negative. I'm positive. The next 2 are positive, and the last 2 I'm not sure. I think one of them is negative. The last one I'm not really sure about because we don't. The last 2 sets of girls or 2 girls, they don't really want to talk about it at all. The second, at least not with me. The second set. One of them is kind of estranged, so I don't really know much about her situation, but one I'm super, super close with. And I learned that I am an outward processor and she is an inward processor. So I called her to say, oh, I'm learning all this information about this, mutation that I have. And you happen to have the mutation too. So let me give you all this information that I'm learning so you don't have to go do the research. I've already done it for both of us. So let me tell you, da, 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 da.
And you think you're doing this like huge, amazing favor and you're like the best sister ever. Yeah.
Yes, actually. And she's like, slow your roll. Yeah. So in fact, we joke around. That is probably the only argument that she and I have really ever been in where I was like nervous. Are we going to have to stop talking or what? She thought that I was trying to convince her to do what I did. Where I didn't realize that that's how I was coming across. And maybe I don't know if, maybe I was coming across that way. Maybe I wasn't, but that's how she was interpreting it. This is what I've learned. This is what I've done. You have the same issue. Therefore you should do the same thing. And that's not at all what I was trying to accomplish. So I felt really bad when I realized that's how she felt.
That's hard because I think especially with the people that we love the most, like our family members, like I say, we love hard and we fight hard. It's like all of the things because it's family, right? And you only want the best for them. So by maybe giving your own example of like, this is how I navigated it, right? Can kind of seem like, are you giving me advice? I wasn't ready for the advice yet, etc. So
Yes. She also is 8 years younger than I am. So we were in totally different places. Since then, she ended up getting pregnant one more time and then decided to have a hysterectomy. So I take credit for my niece. And now, so I had my double mastectomy in 2016. My sister, just this past February, 2025, she just had her double mastectomy, and I had implants. She is having a deep flap reconstruction. So she's doing that in June. And I'm going to go back up north to help take care of her during that period. So it's just been interesting, the progression. And it's been interesting. Just the conversations and the timelines and everything. And then my girls are now 23 and 25. And we don't talk about it very much at all. My 25-year-old knows that she needs to go ahead and have, in fact, she has a primary care appointment tomorrow, and she's going to ask for a referral to get a mammogram. So she knows that she needs to start surveying, doing surveillance. That's what I'm trying to say. But that's it. No need to rush into anything. No need to, go get major surgeries right now. No need to, hurry up and find somebody and have babies. No, we can take our time. So as enthusiastic as I seem about all this information, I'm definitely not about pushing people to do anything they're not ready to do.
Right. No, I appreciate that. And it's so interesting because we're part of a breast cancer book club that we host at survivingbreastcancer.org. And so we just had we meet on the first Sunday of the month, and we read books that have nothing to do with cancer. And this last book, you might have read it, you might have heard about it. It's called The Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. I don't know if you've read it yet, but it's getting like a lot of publicity right now. And
yes.
So, you read this.
I love her podcast.
Oh, so great. And
I'm
inspiring, right? So,
right.
But like what I loved about a particular chapter in her book was, like let them, but then also let me, right? So it's this like not one or the other, but this combination of the equation of, let them make their decisions, let them, be themselves, but then also let me, and how can I be the best person to support them with those decisions, with giving them information or, giving of myself because that gives me joy versus knowing that I need to do something because I care so much for my loved ones, be it your sister or your children. But when they're ready to make those decisions, I'm hearing in your story that like you're allowing for this space to happen over time. And one of the other very interesting things that I didn't really think about it until I read it in the book is like, when we're going through school, like kindergarten through college, right? Like we're kind of moving in this cohort model with people our same age, processing in the same way that we're spending all this time with. We're going to college, we're living together with our friends. Like we are with these people day in and day out. And then you get thrown into the workforce. And then all of a sudden, like your colleague might be 20 years older than you, or like, a couple decades difference. And so the commonalities are kind of few and far between, right? So your story, having already had children, making the decision that you're not looking to have any more children at this time was the most appropriate option for you, right? But then if you're in your 20s, what does this mean for that person? And so I think these are really excellent examples. And even your sister who went on to have a child, like incredible. So I love that you have these 3 different touch points of the different paths that people can take, and that you're sharing those stories with the larger community is just really incredible. So I really appreciate that, Debbie.
My bonus kids also are part Jewish and on their mom's side. And because of that, I pushed to have them tested also. And it turns out both of them are negative, which is great. But I guess where I am pushiest, if I could say it that way, is I really feel like knowledge is power. So I get confused about the person who says, la, 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 I don't want to know. Don't tell me. I just don't want to talk about it. Especially, for so many different reasons, whether you already have children, you want, if you ask any breast cancer survivor, and you're a breast cancer survivor, right? Okay. So if someone had told you, and maybe I'm wrong, but because I'm not a survivor, I'm a previvor. But if someone had said, we might be able to give you some information to prevent you from getting cancer prior to you getting cancer, would you have said, yes, I'd like to know that?
Right. Absolutely.
Right. I don't know of any breast cancer survivor who would say, nah, I'm just going to let the chips fall where they may. And I think about this in the same way that I think about insurance, car insurance or homeowners insurance. Like you get car insurance or you buy a new car and they want you to have your car insurance like almost before you drive it off the lot. Like, or if you haven't, like within 24, you need to get your car insurance as quickly as possible because there's so much out there that could happen so quickly. And it has happened to people where they've like literally driven off the lot and gotten in an accident on the way home, which, hopefully is extremely rare. But I feel like this is the same way we don't know. There's so many toxins in our environment and there's so much history that we don't know about our own selves because it's not like we've been doing genetic testing for decades and centuries, generations and generations. This is actually fairly new science. So I really feel like it just knowledge is power. And the more information you have, the more you know, the more you are empowered to make decisions that are right for you.
Fast forward to like today, are you still doing any types of screenings for breast cancer?
So yes. So for the first, let's see, this is 2025. I had it in 2016. So I would say up until 2023, I was getting MRIs annually. And I happened, this is a whole nother topic of conversation. So I was lucky enough to be able to go direct to implant. And the implant that my doctor used were textured teardrop implants, which in 2019, so 3 years after my mastectomy, I went for an MRI and the MRI showed that one of my implants had ruptured. And I was so upset because I thought, oh my gosh, I don't want to have another surgery. I had some necrosis that had happened. So some of my tissue had died and I had to have emergency surgery. And then there's fat grafting. So I'd already gone through enough. I thought, I can't believe I'm going to have these implants removed and new ones put in because there's a rupture. Well, it turns out that textured teardrop implants are now banned worldwide because they cause a rare form of lymphoma. So it turned out to be a blessing in disguise. So now I have smooth round implants, but I ended up having another surgery. So having those, especially because I have implants, I think having MRIs. Not necessarily annually, because now I have spoken with gotten multiple opinions, and the consensus seems to be that you really don't need to have annual MRIs. It's super expensive. So I'm going to start doing them every other year, but I do see a breast care specialist every year. I see an oncologist every year. And I see, just like my primary care, instead of my GYN appointments, now I see an oncologist and I see a breast care specialist. And I think she's going to start doing, she did this past year, an ultrasound because I ended up keeping my nipples. So we do an ultrasound and then every other year I'll do MRIs. I also go to a dermatologist every year now too.
You mentioned that your daughters did not get tested until they turned 18. Can you tell me a little bit from just like your mental perspective, being a mom of daughters, knowing that you carried this genetic mutation and not knowing at that time, like, did that impact you? Were you carrying like this weight, or were you able to just kind of compartmentalize and figure out like, I'm just going to continue to live my life and then present this with my family at the right appropriate time?
So my girls were in their teens when I found out that I had the mutation. And so I explained, why is mom, who's healthy, going to have surgery? So I explained to them what I was doing, and I explained it in an age-appropriate way, that I was preventing myself from getting cancer. And they both completely seemed to accept that with no issues whatsoever. That this is what, I felt was right to do, because I said, I got a lot of life to live and I want to be here for you. And so this is reducing my risks so I can make sure that I'm here for you. And so they asked questions about themselves, well, when does that mean we need to have? One of them said, so does this mean that when I'm done having babies, if I don't like how my boobs look, that I can just get new ones? And I said, probably, yeah, I think so. She was like, cool.
Okay. Way to
Okay.
reframe it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So again, I think that their perspective, and both of them said they wanted to be tested like as soon as possible. They wanted the knowledge. And I sat down with them and said, just because you know this information doesn't mean you're going to do anything about it. So they both found out when they were 8. I mean, one of them, she got the phone call from the genetic counselor. Hey, we just want to let you know, and this is really big news, and da-da-da. And she was like, thank you for letting me know. And she hung up, and I said, are you okay? And she's like, no, I have so much homework to do. And I was like, oh, wait. So yeah, she was almost kind of unfazed about it. I mean, we really haven't talked very much about BRCA. I have asked them periodically, hey, do you want, I'm going to go be a volunteer at a young previvors conference. Would you like to come with me? And they, both of them, when I asked them recently, they were both like, no, we're busy. And I'm like, okay. So I'm, again, learning from my conversations with my sister, not being pushy. But I am sending out my mommy reminders, you're 25, sometime this year, you need to go ahead and have that mammogram done. And I'll hold your hand through it, and I'll be there with you, and whatever. So yeah. So the fact that they wanted to know, I think, was a good thing. Yeah, and that's if they decided they didn't want to know, then I know typically they say you shouldn't get tested before the age of 25, because that is such a great burden to carry. So I wouldn't, if both of them were like, no, we don't want to know, then I wouldn't have brought it up again until probably, 25 or between 25 and 28, probably.
There's definitely a high probability, right? That's why we are being proactive and taking these actions. But then I also want to remind people, and people as young as your daughters, like, that's the lifetime risk, right? So it's not like all of a sudden you find out that you are carrying this mutation, and then tomorrow you're going to wake up with cancer.
That is such a good point. Really, really good point, because your highest risk actually, so lifetime risk is really up until age 70 or so, 70, 75. And your highest risk, sorry about my dogs.
Oh, I love the doggies. They're always welcome on the podcast.
Good. Your highest risk is actually in your late 40s and through your 50s. So yeah, there is no need to rush if you don't feel like you're there yet. Most breast cancers are spontaneous, as opposed to genetic. Because of my Jewish ancestry, my cancer my mutation rather was passed down from my dad's side. My mom's side, there's definitely no mutation there. So that's one of the questions I've had for myself is, I don't have any cancer that I know of in my family. Was I too bold in my decision to go and have these, life-changing surgeries? But it's silent on my dad's side. Does my dad not have any aunts because they passed away from cancer, or no cousins because, I don't know. He really doesn't have a strong relationship with the extended family. So, and my grandmother, his mom, passed away from a heart attack when I was a baby. So, and again, I think that it's my father's side and his father's side. So yeah, so there's a lot that goes into making the determination of how high your risk is, whether it's your own age or your family history, or or your the genetic predispositions that you have.
I tell a lot of people too, when they ask her, like, how do I make this decision? What should I do? My barometer is like, if I can wake up in the morning and look in the mirror and be happy with myself, my body, and my choices, like I know I made the right choice for me.
You know, you have this mutation, and you know, like my daughters, for example, they have the mutation. They're at their particular age. They've got a lot going on. You know, one is they're both dating. They're not, neither one are engaged yet. But then there's, you know, getting engaged and then getting married and then having children or buying a house or whatever. They've got big things coming up. And so they just might not have time to think about this. And as long as they're doing surveillance, that's all that I ask, is just keep doing your surveillance regularly. Don't miss your mammograms. Don't miss your doctor's appointments. But if you decide, I'm not ready to go through a major surgery, my sister who just went through this surgery, she's a preschool teacher. And even though I'm like, you know, hello, it's time, she was like, I'm a preschool teacher and I've got a little girl, you know, I'm picking up kids all the time. It wasn't the right time in her life to go have surgery. And, you know, you also can't, had she developed cancer, you also can't go back and say, oh, I coulda, shoulda, woulda, you know, you can't go the opposite direction either. So yeah, we have to do what's right for ourselves in the moment, and taking our whole lifestyle into consideration.
Debbie, I really appreciate this conversation. I really appreciate you sharing your personal story and opening up your family to how you guys navigated this collectively with sisters, with your daughters, and kind of how you guys are all doing now. And so I really appreciate you sharing this with our listeners, our community, and I know this won't be the last. And thank you, everyone, for listening to our show. I would like to acknowledge that all of the information on our podcast is from personal experiences and is not a substitute for professional medical advice. You should always contact your medical care team. If you are looking for specific topics or would like to be a guest on our show, please feel free to reach out. My email is laura@survivingbreastcancer.org. Our show is made possible by our nonprofit, survivingbreastcancer.org, and by our incredible donors like yourself. You can hop on over to survivingbreastcancer.org to sign up for our mailing list, make a donation, and explore the 400 plus programs we offer each year at survivingbreastcancer.org/events. Until next time, keep on thriving.